Which camp matchup are we the most excited to see for the Dallas Cowboys this year? All that and more in this episode of Locked On Cowboys Podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. We are answering your Twitter questions today, getting you ready for Cowboys training camp that starts, in about a week, Landon? Is that right?
I think it's actually 8 days, if I'm not mistaken. So we're getting very close. Yeah.
All right. First question from Jack. He wants to know, what is the one camp battle that you were the most excited to see this year?
Man, that's tough, right? Because, we just have been spending all these months kind of eagerly anticipating all of these matchups. So to kind of put one into perspective, I think, for me right now, what I would like to see is and this is kind of a twofer, right? I guess all these are twofers, but I want to see Tyler Smith playing guard versus Mazi Smith inside. I just want to see power on power. I want to see where Tyler Smith is as a guard, and I want to see where Mazi Smith is as an interior defensive tackle. So I think for me, just because there's so much questions going around the offensive line, the lineups, that sort of thing. I think that a key to that is going to be whether Tyler Smith is still comfortable playing guard, how he kind of transitions back to that position, if he is going to end up at that position. So there's a lot to watch. There's a lot to see how his transition back to that position goes. And then obviously Mazi Smith being the first round pick, being the crown jewel of the draft class, he's going to have a huge role on this defense. You want to see where he is right away against a guy that you think is Tyler Smith, that is, a bigger, stronger offensive lineman in this league. And I think it would be a nice test to see these kind of young guys go against each other, just to see what we have inside.
You and I have been doing this podcast for a while now. And as you were talking, I just thought, is Mazi Smith like the first round pick that we've talked about the least so far, kind of going into camp? Cause I remember at this time last year, we were talking a ton about, okay, hey, is Tyler Smith going to start? Remember early on in training camp practices, he was rotating with Connor McGovern at left guard, right? We talked about CeeDee Lamb a couple of years ago. It just seems Micah Parsons where he was going to line up.
I'll do you one better. We talked, I think, more about Tristan Hill when he was the second round pick than we probably have about Mazi Smith.
So I think Mazi is just going to be one of those guys, like, once we get the pads on and we're done with this walkthrough stuff where you can't really pop pads or anything, like, he'll be probably somebody that we get really excited about. But it's just crazy that, we've gone like a month without talking about the Cowboys' first round pick. I just think that's kind of insane.
Well, it's funny because, right, like, you've got two players that you're really excited. You're excited about all these guys, but two of these players specifically that you're excited about, and Deuce Vaughn and Mazi Smith, right? And we talk about how the draft is like football Christmas, right? And you get there and you open up your presents and you see what you got. You kind of don't open up your gifts for the defensive tackles and the running backs until training camp, right? Like, you don't really get to see
what kind of even till the preseason, like when you can actually start tackling people, right? Because
that's right.
The Cowboys, how they run, at least under Mike McCarthy, they're going to be very careful. They're not going to do a lot of live tackling. So we're going to probably have to wait till the second week of August before we see him make any notable type of plays.
And I think that's why, part of the reason that it's been tough to talk about is because there hasn't been much to see. All we've been going on is still just tape from Michigan, what we've seen him, what he played up there. So, we're still waiting on that kind of second Christmas to open up our presents, whether it's the second or third week of training camp or the first preseason game, just to see what we've got in someone specifically like Mazi Smith.
My matchup is one between two players that have never played a snap for the Cowboys before. I think it's going to be Brandon Cooks against Stephon Gilmore on the outside. We know that Cooks is probably going to be mostly an outside receiver. That's where Gilmore is going to play. And I'll just be interested to see what happens, because I think my biggest fear with Gilmore, as you get to be a 32, 33-year-old corner, is can he handle speed on the outside? And is Brandon Cooks, I think Brandon Cooks is 29, turning 30. Is Brandon Cooks still somebody that has that elite speed? I think we're going to find out pretty quickly what these two players can bring to the offense and the defense. I'm just so excited to see what those two vets look like in camp.
Well, and the really fascinating thing about that is that they bring such a rich history with each other to this group, right? Like they practiced and played against each other so much when they both played for the Patriots and then just, being in the league, that they kind of already have like this sort of matchup that they're just kind of continuing just with different uniforms. So that's obviously a
I didn't even think about that. I kind of forgot they played together.
On that
Super
that
Bowl
weird?
team,
I mean,
right?
It's so crazy. They were buddies at when they were the Patriots. They apparently kept track of each other and still talked twice a week, even after they went separate ways. So
it wasn't in the Super Bowl. Was it the 2019 Super Bowl? The game-winning interception by Stephon Gilmore was with Brandon Cooks as the receiver for the Rams, right? Remember the interception right down in the end zone?
Oh, that's right.
When they were together. So they've even have a matchup against each other in the biggest game of the year. So it's just a really interesting, a lot of history between these two guys, and seeing them wear the star on their helmets is going to be a lot of fun in camp. I just can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. A continuation of a battle between these two guys, these two friends, there in Oxnard and Dallas Cowboys camp. It should be exciting and fun.
One more that I'm really interested to see. It's just Micah Parsons. I want to see how he does against everyone, right? Because Parsons, I don't know if you've seen this on Instagram or Threads or whatever social media you're using now. He's been talking a lot of smack about the offense and how he's going to dominate them in training camp, and he's getting ready. I think he posted a countdown today, like 7 days until I got to go up against this group. And he posted a picture of the offensive line. Like he's ready to hunt this offensive line, which I think is amazing. I'm curious to see if he makes this leap in year 3, because I think the first 2 years, I mean, he was an incredible pass rusher who didn't really know what he was doing. Now he's been working with some pass rush specialists. I just want to see, like, is he giving Tyron Smith just all sorts of fits in practice? I'm just pumped to see it.
If you remember last year, his training camp wasn't like people weren't freaking out, but it was because like he was destroying every single play, and they were just like, okay, Micah, just like let us finish the play. Yeah. It was so funny to watch because he would destroy whatever tackle it was, come around and touch Dak, and they're like, okay, Mike. It's
a little bit of like what Dez did back in like the early 2010s, where like
come on,
we had to talk about
practice here,
right? We had to talk about who was the star of practice. Well, outside of Dez, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's where we're at with Micah Parsons.
Well, Micah's just like, okay, Micah, you got the sack. Now let us finish practicing the play so the offense can get better for the weeks that they don't have to play Micah Parsons. So, I do think it's going to be fascinating to see. If he continues that level of dominance, and if we can even really tell outside of, like one-on-one situations, because they'll just basically go, yeah, Micah, just don't touch Dak. Just go over. Okay, you won, buddy.
That's what I wonder. Like in practice, if I could see a scenario where Micah plays more off the ball linebacker than people think in the first couple of weeks of training camp, and that gets everybody out, upset and wondering, hey, is he not going to be an edge rusher? But instead, it's just allowing players like Sam Williams and Lawrence Armstrong just to get more reps at defensive end, right?
Yeah. I mean, what Micah Parsons is going to do. It's not like you need him to check in on him. Now, obviously, he's got areas he can improve. That with areas we just talked about, in his hand placement, his technique. Those are areas that he will need to work on it. But I also think that they know that they've got a pretty baseline good player, and that Sam Williams could use some extra reps to kind of get better and grow a little bit himself.
All right, we talked about some of the things that we're the most excited to see next week at training camp. But what is our biggest concern going into camp? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That is $200 that you can spend betting on anything and everything, from the money line to the over/under to who you think is going to get the first home run of a game, all in an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. And what's better than that? There is no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, we'll be back on tomorrow's show to talk about this awesome new staff of analytics people that the Cowboys have brought in under John Parks. So make sure you guys are tuning in for that. But today we are continuing answering your Twitter questions. This next one I lost for who is from. Oh, it's from John. Here he goes. He wants to know, what is the biggest concern going into training camp for the Cowboys?
Well, I just think there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, we've talked all off season about the fact that the Cowboys have a couple different spots where things aren't quite nailed down, and we're not freaking out about it because we feel like the Cowboys have good solutions there. We just don't know which solution they're going to go with. And I specifically am looking at the offensive line, I think here, right? You've got a collection of players that you think will create a good starting five. The question is, will they be arranged the way that we think that they will be? So I think my biggest concern is, what happens if that doesn't work out as cleanly as we thought? Or if that,
what if they have an injury, right? Like, what if they have an injury at a spot? And
I think injury is always number one, right? Biggest concern number one. There's, with training camp, you get these guys who are starting to ramp up, exercise and work in a way that they've obviously been playing at, or working out at a high level. Most of them have throughout the offseason, just kind of getting themselves ready. But it's a step up in training camp, and there's a level of physicality that you are literally not allowed to have in the OTAs and mini camps. So there's always the concern that injury can happen. You add that in with at a position where, like I said, we have good answers, but we don't have the answer yet. I think that it could be a situation where, what if Tyler Smith turns an ankle or
I was thinking, I mean, knock on wood, this isn't even real well, but like Zach Martin, because who's your backup right guard? We talked about Chuma Edoga really being like a left side player. Who's your right side guard backup? Because I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume it'd be, either someone like Willetsko or someone like
Farniak.
Farniak, yeah. I mean, it would be a scary situation.
It'd be a disaster.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that there's always that concern that's there, and then like I said, with the offensive line, but just kind of generally, there's certain spots where we feel confident because of the situation. There's a combination of a young player and an old player, or you have some sort of contingency plan inside that position group, that if your plan A doesn't work, that you've got a plan B. But obviously, what happens if we get to training camp and plan A and plan B don't work?
Yep.
What happens if it's like the wide receiver position last year, where your plans that you made, all of them fell through, and then now you're really, really kind of screwed at the position?
I mean, I could see that happening at linebacker, right? Like they're counting on, Damone Clark or Jabril Cox or Overshawn, like one of those guys just to step up and be that number 2 linebacker. Mm-hmm. What if Leighton Vander Esch, let's say it's not even anything major. Like he just tweaks a hamstring and he's out 3 weeks. All of a sudden, you don't really have a proven linebacker on your roster, right? So that's one spot that it concerns me. The other one, I'm going to say it, I know you probably disagree with it, but it's kicker. I just think, I think there is, because there's so much uncertainty around that position, it's going to make things kind of uncomfortable. And they're going to get into situations in camp where it's, hey, offense, you're down by 3 with 30 seconds left. Do you trust your kicker to make a 48-yard field goal? I don't know that they do. And I think that can make your whole team a little bit anxious when you get into some of these late game situations. So maybe they figure out something in camp. Maybe one of these guys steps up, but I do think that's one of the positions that I am concerned about going into the training camp.
I mean, listen, I've said my piece about kickers. Everydayers have heard me say my piece about kickers lots, but I mean, I think if anything, what I've been saying this whole time is that there isn't a time that you shouldn't be concerned about kicker. Sure. Like it's like, because there is no certainty with kicker. But
there are guys out there, like when you had like Dan Bailey in his prime, and I know it fell off quickly, but
until they don't, but that's the problem,
but
right?
At least going into, I mean, for 4 or 5 seasons, you felt really, really good about your kicker. I mean, the Cowboys this is nothing new for them. Is this like the 3rd year in a row that we've had kicker questions for them?
Yeah, but at the same, I guess my point is that, you got halfway through the season feeling pretty good about your kicker last year, and then he just completely fell off. It just happened suddenly. And I think that's what happens with all these guys. Like, I think there is a point where you can get a kicker that you feel like maybe can give you something for the long haul and, go through, some down times and then recover and that sort of thing. But for the most part, like, the position is just a giant concern all the time, as far as I'm concerned, because there's just no certainty at the position. There's no stability at the position the way that there is in a lot of other positions in football.
I mean, it still makes me nervous. I just wish they had.
Absolutely.
I wish they had a veteran that had some skins on the wall that you'd be like, okay, even if he struggles, he's been around the league for 10 years. He's been, an 86% kicker or whatever it is. He'll be fine. With the group they have in there, like, there's a chance that I don't want to say they could ruin practice, because I don't think a kicker can ruin practice. But I saw this with the Bears a couple of years ago. Like, remember when they had the double doink against the Eagles? And that's all they focused on in training camp the next year, was making that 42-yard field goal that just hung over them. And they were a terrible team the following year. I don't think that's going to happen to the Cowboys, but I do wonder, until they settle down this position a little bit, if it is a little bit of a cloud over them.
My counter to that would be, the problem was not the bad kicker. The problem was them overreacting.
I think that's a
kicker.
fair point.
So and I think that's what I'm saying, is that you do what you do. You get the guys you think, you make the best educated decision you can before the season. But at a certain point, it's just a crapshoot. Even if you've got the best kicker in football, age comes for them all at some point.
Yeah, I would agree. The only other thing I would mention is some of these guys just coming back from injury. We saw them last year. I don't want to say they rushed Michael Gallup back, but maybe they did a little bit.
I think they did. I mean, look, the problem is relying on Michael Gallup.
That was the issue.
And that was the issue. And I think that was where they made
So I'm just looking at, like, Terrence Steele. Like, are they going to rush Terrence Steele to be ready by week 3 of training camp? How does some of these other guys look that have been a little bit banged up this offseason? It sounds like DeMarcus Lawrence had some little operation. Those guys just always re-aggravating injuries and then missing 3 or 4 weeks of camp always concerns me a little bit. But outside of that, I don't feel like there's a ton to be overly concerned about going into this year.
There's still some stuff to figure out. Like we said, there's still some stuff to get into training camp and figure out exactly what it's going to look like, who's going to be doing what. But as far as, like, major fears of holes on this team, Cowboys have done a pretty darn good job of filling holes.
Yeah, and the only other thing would be, like, how does Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer, how do they work together to call plays? Exactly. How does that come in? How does Dak, is it like secondhand nature to Dak when it comes to, like, calling audibles? That stuff we'll probably all get worked out in the first 2 weeks of camp. They'll probably have some breakdowns and they'll have to repeat plays and stuff. But other than that, I think they're going to be okay. Landon, I want to talk to you about kind of the changing landscape of offenses in the NFL, which means maybe more fullbacks this year. We'll talk about that next. All right, our last question here. This is always just a little bit of catnip for Landon, just to get him interested in the podcast. This one comes from Pigskin Prognosticator. He said, with guys like Coach A and Brett Coleman predicting the NFL to get bigger on offense with more fullbacks and tight end usage to put defenses in conflict, what are some Cowboy-specific things we can look forward to knowing who McCarthy has been historically, like using fullbacks?
Oh, man. Wow. Well, what isn't there to look forward to when a fullback's on the field, guys? And I do agree. I think that this was something that was predictable, obviously. It will switch back, right? Like that as teams get lighter in the box to try to defend the pass more, there will be more opportunity for teams to get bigger and take advantage of those lighter boxes and get a higher efficiency on run plays than they would have previously, right?
Well, and like look if you're going against the Cowboys defense, look how they play. They play a lot of three safeties. They're going to play Donovan Wilson, a 208-pound safety as a linebacker. You've got Micah Parsons, who's a 245-pound edge. I think it only makes sense to get bigger guys in the field to try to pound them in the run game.
Yeah, so I think what you'll start seeing if you start seeing more fullback is, and Marcus and I pointed out one specific play that we both really love. is the lead draw. It's a Cowboys classic. It's, Emmett made so much money off of that play. We were talking about Julius Jones was extremely good at running that play.
DeMarco Murray was very good at running.
Murray was also very good. And usually, it's an I formation play where it looks like it's a drop back pass, and the fullback and running back delay just a second, and then suddenly everything goes all at once up the middle with the handoff to the halfback while the fullback leads his way through the hole. It's a beautiful play. It's fun to watch. There's tons and tons of stuff that can be done, especially I don't think it's coincidental too that as they start to put in more West Coast principle stuff, they're starting to look into more of a fullback than they have previously. I mean, they definitely had guys that could play fullback on the roster these last few years for sure, but you have to think that with the signing of Hunter Lepke, that they have plans to use him in that position and as well as a running back as well. So you'll see offset. You'll see him line up as a wing. You'll see, trap blocks where he's a wing and he's coming inside and whamming a defensive tackle. It really, what it does is it gives you another versatile moving blocker, a guy that can hit a moving target, shield off a defensive lineman, and just kind of add a little bit of creativity if you wanted to run some more power or gap stuff. And then on top of that, on the stretch stuff, I mean, he's just another set of running back eyes in the backfield that can help, clear out one extra blocker to give the running back a little bit of a cleaner look. And that's why it's sometimes useful to have a running back playing fullback, right? Is because he has running back eyes. He can see the threats. He knows where the running back wants to go. And so he can kind of help eliminate that. And then in the passing game, these guys are valuable as play action pass receivers. They can leak out of the backfield. They get forgotten. They usually get covered by the worst athlete on the field, whenever that happens. And then sometimes you can take advantage if you've got a fullback who's a little bit slippery who can move.
As for Mike McCarthy's history, he's used the fullback a lot. Like back in his days in Green Bay, they had John Kuhn, who had a bunch of rushing touchdowns. Remember, McCarthy is a PA guy. We love our fullbacks here in PA. So I won't be surprised to see them have one on the roster. I just don't know who it's going to be. Is it going to be Hunter Lepke, right, who they signed as an undrafted free agent? Is it going to be another offensive lineman like they used last year and the year before that when it was Connor McGovern? They even used Terrence Steele a little bit in the backfield. Was that 2 years ago? So who's that guy now? Because Connor McGovern's gone. Is it Farniak? Is it somebody else? We'll see. And then if you want to look like down the roster and guys that are on the practice squad, I'm interested to see is Sean McEwen playing more H-back? Is Princeton Fant, who was he was a tight end in college and a running back, does he get lumped in with the fullbacks? I just kind of want to see how they're trying to navigate that position, or they have an extra roster spot right now. Do they go out and try to sign the best available fullback? All these things are going to be things that we see early in camp.
Well, it'll also be interesting to see exactly fullback has had a lot of flavors over the years. It's changed quite a bit over the time. You mentioned them having, putting tight ends and offensive linemen there. Fullback is also not the 6'1", 270-pound guy who is, Moose Johnson types anymore, right? Like they are more of a versatile player. They, because they aren't as required for the offense, or they're not as such a.
You have to wear a lot of hats, right?
Yeah,
you have to do a lot of things.
A ton of hats. You got to play special teams. You probably got to play every special team to be good at it. You got to be a good tackler. You got to be able to play probably tight end a little bit too, and running back, because you have to make yourself roster useful, and that's going to require. Especially if you're only getting in as, let's say 10 snaps a game or something like that. It's probably not.
You got to be able to be a viable receiver. You've got to block. You've got to be able to do these fullback dives. I know it's not the most creative running play in the world, but you got to be reliable. You have to show that you have a little bit of power in that situation as well. That's why these guys are hard to find.
That's right. And you wouldn't tolerate a running back 3 that didn't play special teams or, didn't have something else. So you have to find a way to make him game day roster useful outside of the 10 or 15 snaps that he's going to play on offense. So it's not exactly an easy spot to find. And that's why they usually end up trying to find, parse it together with other guys like a tight end or like in our case, an offensive lineman, because having a guy do that full time and be good at it, and then also be good enough at special teams and whatever to justify a roster spot on game day is tough.
Last thing before we go. Who's your favorite Cowboys fullback over the last 20 years? So not including Moose. Let's see if I can rattle off some of the names. It was Richie Anderson, Jameis Olawale, Cricket Anderson, Tony
Anderson's the answer. Cricket Anderson's the answer.
Keith? What was it? Not Keith Davis. Keith Davis. Keith Smith.
No, what's Keith Smith? Keith Smith, who's still playing, right?
Yes,
he's with the Falcons, if I'm not mistaken.
Rod Smith was our favorite kind of hybrid fullback.
Right.
Am I missing any?
You mentioned Fiumetta, right?
Yeah, Tony Fiumetta for a couple of years was really good.
He was really interesting because he was kind of a weird body type for the position, but he really could block. I loved Cricket just because that dude was crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely
I think I got
crazy.
Ball, right?
Yeah, I think you did too. They named him Cricket because he ate a cricket.
Yeah,
right?
he ate a cricket. He liked eating crickets, I think.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
You got to be a little crazy to be a fullback, right?
Absolutely. You have to either be crazy or be on your way to crazy.
Yes, exactly.
To play fullback for sure. I
all right.
Attest.
I love talking fullbacks. This is the absolute best. All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Again, every day. So we'll be back tomorrow to talk about this new analytics team that the Cowboys have hired this offseason. Just want to let you know that we are free and available on all platforms. Check out our show on YouTube as well. You can follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.